Howdy y'all, my name is Josh and welcome back to another Nightcore Store video. And today, by popular demand, we're going to be comparing the P20iX to the EDC35 and then to the SRT7i. And to compare all of these lights, I'm going to be looking at 4 categories that make up a good light. Its features, its UI, its specs, and its EDC ability. And for each of the 4 categories, I'm going to be ranking them out of 5, and then at the end we'll see how they compare to each other and what the average score of each light was. And so stick around, thank you so much for liking and subscribing, and let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so first off, in our 4 categories here, we're going to be looking at features. And what better to start off with than the P20iX. Now, all things considered, this isn't the most feature heavy, but it has some very useful ones for what it does have. It has some glass breakers, which is going to be those little beads that you see there inlaid in the bezel. And as well as that, it's going to have this USB-C port right here, which is going to be guarded by this little silicone boot, which you can pull off and then you can recharge it through the light. As well as that, it's going to have a rechargeable battery. The only thing is, this is going to be an I-series battery, meaning that it's proprietary to only Nightcore and only these specific types of Nightcore batteries. As you can see here, there's going to be a positive and negative end on both sides. And while it is supposed to help with its durability, like whenever it hits something really hard, the battery is supposed to be more durable. It's still proprietary, so it's not going to be my favorite. And lastly, here we have a monocolor battery indicator light, which will flash whenever your battery gets low. And whenever you pop in a new battery, it will display your voltage. And so it's not the most intuitive, but I'd rather have it than not have it. And so in terms of features, while the P20iX does have some very nice features like the glass breakers, the very proprietary battery, and the more or less suboptimal battery indicator, and then the silicone boot, it's all pretty basic. The battery holds it back a little bit from being higher, but I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Next up for the features is going to be the SRT7i. Like the P20iX, it's also going to have those glass breakers there in the bezel. And as well as that, something that I like more than the P20iX is this full metal USB-C cover, which I like a lot more because whenever I'm refueling the P20iX, I'm always scared that I'm going to rip off the little silicone boot of it, so the metal is much nicer in my opinion here. And then sadly, like the P20iX though, it's going to have the proprietary I-series battery, which again, it does make the battery more drop resistant. However, it's just not my favorite thing because of how proprietary it is. Also, looking here at the tail cap, you can see these little lanyard fins, which is going to be very nice, but that also means that this light can pretty easily tail stand. And again, very similar to the P20iX, this is also going to have a single monocolor battery indicator light, which is going to flash the lower you get down on your battery percentage, and it will tell you the voltage whenever you pop a new battery in. And so overall, I think the features are going to be better. I mean, again, I'm not the biggest fan of the I-series battery, but the metal cover is very nice. I think that the fact that it can tail stand back here is also pretty good. And so I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 for features. And now finally, let's check out the features of the EDC35. I think that this is going to have the best USB-C cover out of all of these because it's going to be this little swiveling system right here that reveals the USB-C this way, meaning that there's nothing that can catch. Like with the SRT7i, I've heard of some people whenever they have this little latch open, it getting caught and then ripped off. That is something that is not good, and it can happen to the silicon one of the P20iX as well. And so the fact that this is all going to be pretty flush to the tail of the light is going to be awesome, and again, nothing's going to be able to get ripped or broken off of this cover. Also with the EDC35, it's going to have this brand new lockout switch that I really like, and so it's locked here, unlocked there, meaning that the light works in normal operation. And I really like this as opposed to the traditional quarter unturn or half unturn because it's not tactile enough for me. I always feel like somehow the light's gonna retighten itself and turn on in my pocket or my backpack. And so having this switch on here and just feeling that tactile, knowing that it's locked out, knowing that it's not gonna work no matter how I mash it, is going to be awesome. And like the SRT7i, it can tail stand, which is going to be awesome. And as well as that, if I were to give you a look at that bezel, that little black dot that you see right there is going to be the proximity sensor. And so if I were to turn this light on and then get it close to an object, it will sense it and then step down. And then while the light is on, it has a very intuitive battery indicator that has this 4 bars, and so it's pretty easy to decipher it. I mean, 100, 75, 50, and then 25% left. It's pretty awesome, I love it. The only thing that I can gripe about whenever it comes to features of this is going to be the built-in 21700 battery. I mean, honestly, most people hate it. I'm kind of there with you, it's not my favorite. But overall, if I had to give this a score out of 5, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. It has a lot of things that I really like: an intuitive USB-C cover, a very nice and tactile lockout switch, and something to keep your pockets and your hands safe, so that way you're not starting fires. This has it all, it's just the built-in battery isn't going to be my favorite, like the proprietary batteries of these two. And now let's talk user interfaces for all of these lights. Looping back to the P20iX, this probably has one of the best UIs in my opinion. It has a power button right here that's pretty hard to miss, and then using this mode pedal, you can either enter the instant turbo, or you can change your brightness just like that. And you also have access to instant strobe using that same pedal as well. Everything's gonna be straightforward. It's all on the tail cap, so that way you only have to use your thumb. You don't have to do the side switch to the tail switch. It's all already there. It's really nice, it's very tactile. The only thing that's not gonna be my favorite about this UI is how far this button sticks out from the rest of the light. And so it's pretty easy to activate, and without the proximity sensor, that's just bad news bears in my opinion. And so there are alternate tail caps you can get out there, but I'd like some fins or an easier way to lock it out rather than having a half turn. Overall, this is probably one of the best, most intuitive UIs out there. The button is going to be holding it back, but that's really just a nitpick. And so I'm going to give this a 4.6 out of 5. And now looking at the user interface for the SRT7i, off the bat, it already looks somewhat similar to the P20iX. I mean, you still have that instant turbo and instant strobe, which is going to be very nice. And as well as that, you have this stepless brightness ring, which you can increase to increase the brightness, which is going to be very nice. The only thing is, a lot of this acts in tandem, and you need to fully know how to use this light in order to effectively use this light. Bear in mind, this is going to be a 2-stage power switch, a 2-stage mode pedal, and then you have this whole ring here that's full of functions. And so lockout, ultra low, stepless section, turbo, and then tactical. And so this is a lot to keep track of. However, while it is a lot to keep track of, it's giving you a lot of control. And look at this. There's going to be clearance here, so that way it's pretty hard to activate it accidentally. And so I think that the large amounts of control is combated by the complexity of it. And so I'm gonna meet somewhere in the middle here and give this a 2.5 out of 5 for UI. And now looking at the EDC35, it's going to be a 1-button UI. Full mash it and you'll get instant floodlight, and then half press and hold and you'll get spotlight. And then if you full press it and then half press, you can change your brightness setting. The only thing is, it's missing the strobe for me. I really like strobe on all of my lights, but if you don't necessarily need strobe, then that's fine. And as well as that, it's a little tricky to get under your fingers. I know that I had a lot of comments talking about how to use this, and so I think that it's going to be slightly better than the SRT7i in terms of UI, just because it's going to be very simple and everything is where it needs to be. I mean, having the brightest setting be on the full mash makes sense, but it's going to be missing a lot of things that I like, so I'm gonna give it a 2.8 out of 5. And now let's look at the specs of the P20iX. Initially, I think that the runtime is going to be a little bit below average, at least for what I look for, and I think that's just because it's getting eaten up by those 4 Cree XP-L2 LEDs. But that's going to kind of be helped by the fact that the battery is removable and replaceable. But again, bear in mind, those are going to be I-series batteries. I like the 850 lumen output, as it's going to be a good middle ground between runtime and brightness. And overall, this is just going to be decently compact. It's very durable. I mean, it is marketed as a tactical light. And I like the floody beam shape. I know that some people might not agree with me, as there is a decent amount of bounce back whenever you're using that. But it works for all of my everyday tasks. It allows me to see what all is around me, which I really appreciate. And so I'd say that it's slightly above average, but not to a crazy degree. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5 whenever it comes to specs. As for the specs of the SRT7i, I know that it's a little bit hard to get a grasp on just because of the stepless nature of this light and how it operates. But I did find a very nice graph off of the Candle Power forums, And overall, the run times are not going to be my favorite again. They're going to be passable. It's going to have a very nice ultra low. You can basically set your own ultra low all the way down to 0.1 lumens to maybe like around 1 lumen, which is going to be very nice for those night tasks where you don't want to wake anyone up. This thing is going to be durable. It is a tactical flashlight overall. It's going to be a little bit more on the bulky and heavy side, but you can see it here in my hand. It's not going to be the most unwieldy thing in the world, and it's going to be very bright, and it's going to have a very nice 634-yard throw. And so overall, I think that this is going to be a 3 out of 5 again, with the outputs being very impressive, the spacing being very nice. I mean, come on, it's stepless. It's going to have nice spacing. You can set the spacing yourself, but the run times are just gonna be holding it back as well. And I'd like it to be a little bit more compact. So 3 out of 5. And now for the specs of the EDC35. First off, 1300 lumens for 4+ hours is great. It does have step down from what I've seen so far. However, I haven't seen it happen. The step down is going to be very subtle, and as well as that, it's going to be getting very hot. That's something that I noticed, but for how compact this light is, for a 21700 light, that's going to be spewing out either 1300 lumens on high or 5000 lumens on turbo. I mean, no duh, it's gonna get hot. It's kind of hard to fight the physics of that. The EDC35 is also going to have a 5 lumen ultra low, which is going to be all right. I mean, I like having a low powered ultra low, but most people, me included, are going to want that to be a 1 lumen, so that way you can go ahead and squeeze all the runtime you can out of that LED. And so while I think that this might be a little bit of a controversial take, just because of how fast the burst modes step down on this and how the ultra low isn't going to be 1 lumen, I think I'm gonna have to give this a 4 out of 5, just because I love the spacings and the run times are there as compared to these other lights over here. And so I think I'm gonna have to stick with my guns and give this a 4 out of 5. And now let's talk about the EDC ability of these lights, you know, if that's a word. Now looking at the P20iX, it's going to be very compact. I mean, you can see it here in my hand. It's going to be a good size. And I like the flood beam, like I said before, because it'll allow you to see all what's around you. And then with the 241-yard throw, it allows you to see decently far away from you. It's not a thrower by any means, but if you need to see beyond, you know, 2 football fields away, look at getting a thrower, but this is going to be good for all of my needs. 4000 lumens is going to be an insane amount of light coming from this compact of a body, and it's going to be great for everyday emergencies, which is kind of an oxymoron, but I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine getting stuck in a building or a car, and these glass breakers are a way out for someone. And again, if somebody starts coming at you some sort of way, you have instant strobe and turbo at your disposal, which with that 4000 lumens is going to be blinding in both the daytime and nighttime. And so I just find this a very flexible overall light. It's going to be decently well priced at $120. That's going to be the middle ground for this price range that I have here for y'all. But the only thing is, because this is a replaceable battery, if you want to take advantage of the fact that it is replaceable, a new battery is going to be $26 and a used I-series battery is going to be $21. And so overall, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 whenever it comes to EDC ability. Lots of power, small body. It's going to be meeting needs wherever you need it to, and it's going to have a lot of practical features, which I like. And now looking at the SRT7i, it's going to be very bright and have a lot of modes, which is going to make it decently flexible. But looking at that super tight beam shape, it's going to be holding it back a little bit, just because it's going to be less useful in situations like, oh, if you drop your pencil, you're only going to be seeing this footprint of light rather than, you know, the P20iX, which is going to be much more diffused and much more broad. But again, that's kind of my preference. If you like seeing a smaller, more intense beam of light, that's all right. But I don't think it's going to be amazing for just everyday carry. As well as that, its user interface is also going to hold it back, because if you want to lend somebody your light, you're giving them this very big, very bulky, very heavy light, and it's going to have a lot of operation. You're going to have to probably spend a minute or two talking to them about what everything does. That way they don't accidentally like strobe themselves on accident. And so it's not going to be the best there either. This is also going to be the most expensive at around $130. And again, a used I-series battery is going to be $21 if you want to take advantage of the fact that the battery is removable. And so I think that this is going to be very good if you have a specialized use for it. I don't think that if you're looking for an everyday carry, you should look at the SRT7i. Very cool light, however, the idea of just carrying this around on your belt loop, unless you live on a decent amount of land, I just don't see as practical. So I'm gonna sadly have to give this a 1.5 out of 5 for the SRT7i and its EDC ability. And now lastly, let's look at the EDC35, which should perform pretty decently here. And in general, it does. It's going to be very compact, it's going to be bright, and its runtimes are going to be decently long lasting. It has a simple enough UI. If you were to lend this to somebody, you can just be like, okay, full press to turn it on, and then half press to switch the brightness. You don't really have to go into like what lumen shield or what spotlight is. And as well as that, it's going to have a clip, which is going to be nice for everyday carry. It comes with a paracord. This little rotary dial is going to be nice for keeping the USB-C clean. And this switch for the lockout is going to be nice for travel. If you need a light for your professional work, then this will probably last you around half to 3/4 of the day. And you're probably gonna have to spend some time charging it up through the USB-C port during your break or for lunch, and that's just not going to be amazing. Now, because this hasn't been on the market for too incredibly long, I'm not sure of the longevity of the internal battery, and I know the warranty service is good, but we'll just have to see how this battery fares as it continues to be on the market. And lastly, as the EDC35 doesn't have strobe, it relies entirely on the lumen shield to be kind of the self-defense option. And while I do like turbo as a self-defense option, I know that some people don't believe in strobe being a self-defense option. This is only going to be a burst that goes anywhere between like 30 to like 10 seconds, and it's going to be getting very hot in your hands. And so I don't like this being like the only option whenever it comes to self-defense for this light. But here's the deal, this light is going to be under $100, which is a fair margin below these two lights, and you're not going to have to buy backup batteries or replacement batteries. And so I think that this is going to be pretty decent. I mean, again, the downsides I feel like don't necessarily undermine the upsides. This is still going to be very compact and very long lasting and very bright. And so this is going to be a 3.5 out of 5 for me whenever it comes to the EDC ability. And now let's look at the final scores of these lights. Looking at features, it's going to be a tie between the SRT7i and the EDC35. The UI is going to be going to the P20iX. And then in terms of specs, it's going to be the EDC35 again. And then finally, the EDC ability is going to be surprisingly going to the P20iX. And now looking at the average of how each light performed, the SRT7i is going to start us off at the bottom with 2.9 out of 5. I wish that was a little bit higher. I honestly think that it ranks a little bit higher than that, but it's going to be above average by 0.4 points, so that's going to be all right with me. Next up is going to be the EDC35, which is going to have an average of 3.6 out of 5 for each of its categories, which is going to be a little bit higher than I initially thought. But again, the built-in battery is only going to be harming its features section and its specs a little bit to a certain degree, and it's going to be helping it whenever it comes to its EDC ability, and so it kind of makes sense. And at the top with an average score of 3.7 out of 5 is going to be the P20iX. Now this is going to be the light that I personally everyday carry, so there might be a little bit of bias there, but then again, it's only going to be 0.1 points above the EDC35, and I just like this light because of its size, its beam shape, and the only real drawback is going to be its kind of bare bonesness and its runtime, which is only going to be hurting it in two categories. So it makes sense that it's going to be performing so well here. Now bear in mind these are averages, and I'm not saying which light is better than another. I'm just seeing how these shake out in comparison to each other through the framing of these four categories. And for me, the P20iX is just going to be meeting all my needs and for what I look for in my lights. Well guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this overview and comparison of these lights. Please bear in mind that this is going to be a more broad overview of each of these lights. I mean, I'm not going to recommend you the EDC35 over the SRT7i if you're going hunting. I mean, this is a great light for hunting. But again, this is if you don't know where to start and you want to get the general gist of all of these lights, especially compared to one another. So do you agree with my assessment of these lights? If you have any questions or if you want to contribute to this conversation at all, please make sure to leave a comment. But either way, I really appreciate y'all sticking around to the end here. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.